Welcome everyone. I'm Nisha Talagala. I'm the CEO of AI Club. I'm very happy to present this session, which is Ask an AI Expert with our esteemed guest, Tushar. So before we get started, just a minute or two about AI Club. So AI Club is an organization that provides AI literacy for K-12 students and beyond. We provide classes, curriculums, tools, to learn AI, coding, IoT, and apps. I think it's probably safe to say that we are the global leader in AI literacy. We've taught over 3,000 students in the last year and a half. Our students have built more than 7,000 AI applications, and they've won more than 15 international and national competition wins. So I think we've been very happy to see what our students have been able to learn and what they've been able to do with the things that they have learned. So in addition to today's event, we have a number of events coming up this summer that I'd like to tell you guys about. So next week, we have the AI Student Research Symposium. There'll be a very nice, it'll be on June 27th, and you'll be able to see what students from grade 6 through 10 have been able to accomplish with AI. There will be 10 student presentations on topics as varied as STEM topics like Alzheimer's and diabetic retinopathy to literature like analyzing the words of Shakespeare. All of those kinds of presentations will be there. And we will also have a keynote from Dr. Bharatram Sundar, who is a noted expert in deep learning and AI for medicine. So I would encourage you guys to check that out. We also have a competition coming up at the end of the summer. It's called the AI Stars competition. It enables kids to basically get free learning sessions on everything from ideation to pitching your idea to developing an app to solve an interesting problem. If you're interested in this one, I would encourage you to register quickly because we've had an overwhelming response to it. And even though we had set the registration deadline to July 15th, it looks like we will need to officially close registrations by Monday because we've already gotten way more registrations than we expected. So we will be starting a wait list on Monday. So if you're interested in this, please do go ahead and register as quickly as you can. We also have a number of summer camps that we're running. We run summer camps every year, and I didn't list them all here. These are just a sample of some of the summer camps that we run. If you're interested in our summer camps, please feel free to check out, this is the URL of our corp website, and just go to summer camp, and we have them for elementary, middle, and high school kids. So feel free to check that out as well. But the event that we have today is Ask an AI Expert. And we are very fortunate to have Tushar here. And so the way this event will work out is I'm going to be the moderator and I'm going to be asking Tushar questions. And now please add your questions to the Zoom chat and I will monitor the Zoom chat and basically, pose the questions to him. So Tushar is, tremendous expert in the overall area of not just AI and ML, but also computing. He's worked in companies, as varied as Facebook and Amazon, as well as Wall Street. And he has done work in, product management, technology development, mergers and acquisitions, and all manners of different areas. So he's a great person to tell us about how AI works in real life and what people do and how this stuff actually kind of works. So that's what we'll be talking about. So go ahead and put your questions on the chat and, and we will take them one by one. I'm going to start with a bunch of questions that came in earlier. And so let me see what we have. Yeah, welcome. And welcome to Shar. So
Welcome. It's great to be here.
I'm glad to have you as well. So maybe I can just start with a bunch of questions that came in earlier. Just give me a minute to pick up the questions here. My questions go. Yes. So yeah, so maybe we can start by, can you start by giving us a few examples of how AI has been used in companies that you worked in?
Right. Let me share with you guys a few key, specific examples of things which I have looked at. So when I came back from Wall Street, back to Silicon Valley, I was in VMware, and I was very closely involved in looking at how we can leverage artificial intelligence in the area of security. So you all must have been, listening about security hacks right now happening across almost every industry, right? It has become like a national security issue now. So to make it very simple, when attackers attack you, they don't attack you with weapons that you knew from the past. They basically have new kind of viruses, new kind of thoughts or new kind of strategies to hurt you. And that's where the concept of, you can say, 0 day attacks come in, which basically means you basically have to find things as you look at them. You do not have any pattern from the past to which to compare. The traditional way to do security of matching virus signatures does not work, right? So now that's where security comes in, or artificial intelligence comes in to tackle with it. I'm not going to bore everybody with all the details of how the AI algorithms work, but I'll give you a thought process, which I think is critical for parents to understand even when they are bringing up their kids. And it's an analogy I've always used. When you grow up, for example, right, guys or girls, let's say in India or even in US, your parents tell you about a lot of security or challenges you might see in life, what kind of situations you should avoid, dark alleys, unknown neighborhoods and stuff like that, right? It's built in your brain. But they cannot tell you about every instance of threat that might come in your life, right? How do you deal with it when you grow up, when you go to college? Let's say, at the age of 18, you come from some place in India or US, you go to college, late in the night after watching a movie, your parents said you should not venture out after 12 o'clock. You did. You're coming back to your hostel, and you are, walking towards your hostel or dorm, and but see somebody coming from in front, right? You don't know the person, you don't know their characteristic, you don't know who they are, right? What your parents have done is they've kind of trained you over a period of time how to look for problem and be prepared. So what do? You just observe the person's characteristic. Okay, is the person a little bit unstable, which means the person may be drunk? Is the person, is singing at the top of the voice, right? And you prepare yourself. If the person attacks me, uh, then I'm going to do this: run away or fight, whatever you do, right? And you go past the person, you keep observing the person, right? It's quite possible the person attacks you, in which case you will figure it out, or else you leave the person and you walk away. Now, that is intelligence, natural intelligence. Artificial intelligence, my friends, is a way to simulate natural intelligence. It's nothing more than that. That's what you do in this kind of security situations. What happens is, when somebody, if you think some patterns are emerging in your network which are different from the normal, remember this is very important. Anomaly detection, right? In your life, when you see real threats, whether from people or situations, you have a template in your mind of what is normal. If anything is not normal, you start matching it, right? Now, anything which is not normal may not be a challenge, right? That's this anomaly, right? Think about this. That's how human brains work. That's how security works. You look for anomalies. So now I will look for anomalies in patterns of how my behavior, how my network is working. And then what you would do is you would basically spin off a micro VM, a virtual machine, to simulate and kind of isolate it and see how that thing is behaving. You'll give the impression to that particular attacker that the attacker is in the same is within your system, but the attacker is not. And then you observe it, and if it's a problem, you shut down the system. If not, you let it work. I just give you an example. So it's a very good example of how security is used. AI is used in a security problem. That's how human mind works, and you figure it out. I really love this, and that's how I think about artificial intelligence all the time. And that's how you should teach your kids also. This is an example from VMware. Facebook, one of the key examples which I remember is, uh, all of us use Facebooks, right? And then let's say me and Nissa and Amit are good friends. Amit likes a few things, and then or orders something or likes an ad. I also start seeing it, right? Now, and I'm not going to be criticizing Facebook, but look at Facebook, for example. They'll figure out what kind of things I like, and then slowly and slowly they basically start approaching people who have similar characteristics as me. Maybe education, they take a lot of information from us, right? Education, age, country of origin, where I work, right? This is called look-alike modeling. I first give you an example of AI to deal with zero-day attacks. Now I'm talking about look-alike modeling. This is a very deep concept in artificial intelligence. There's a specific term for it, which I'm forgetting right now, but they do what is called look-alike modeling. And that is an AI example of AI. We look for similar features and characteristics and entities, and you basically figure it out, right? That's how, by the way, kids also think when they're actually growing up. If they have a friend whose parents are of similar neighborhood, similar characteristic, and they get these kind of facilities and these kind of things, they also want it. And from parents' perspective, at least me growing up in India in a small industrial township, The question was very simple. If Mr. Gupta, Mr. Srivastava, Mr. Jain's kid goes to the same school with same facility and he got into an IIT exam, why the hell can't you? Got it? This is how it works. So parents, artificial intelligence, kids, artificial intelligence, and Facebook lookalike modeling. Another very good example. The one which is a little bit more decent is Amazon Web Services, because they have a lot of these products for image recognition. So think about human beings, right? We have five senses, right? Smell, touch, hear, whatever, right? AI tries to model this to a great extent. So vision, that is modeled with image recognition, video recognition products. Voice, it's done with voice recognition software, right? We human beings have challenges like translate. You go from one language to another, right? They have built products around all of this. The challenge where AI has got a long way to go is putting all of these things together and try to recreate a human being, right? That is what a self-driving car is trying to do. It's a very tough problem. I can have a longer conversation on that, but they have multiple layers to simulate all different parts of human beings. But it's always start from how human brain thinks, how we think, and that's how AI gets actually done. And as parents, my request to all of you would be, as your kids are growing up, and this is a good advice, and Nisa, I know I never told you because I wanted to surprise you here, because otherwise you would not have invited me. As your kids are growing up, don't force them to get into an AI directly. Watch for characteristics in them to see where their natural aptitude is. And I'm going to give some hints of the kind of things you should basically do. And if you feel that this is a kind of thing that they would love to, encourage them to pursue. If the signals you are getting that they want to do something else in life, and AI is a good and fulfilling career, my friend, it's good to learn the basics of AI because it's going to influence every industry. Okay, music, English, literature, history, every area will be influenced by it. But try to look for those characteristics and work from there. Let me stop here. Happy to answer questions and stuff. I spoke for a long time, but it's going to be entertaining. I'm not going to bore you on a Saturday evening with RNN and CNN algorithms. Absolutely not.
Well, I mean, I think that everyone would agree that nobody wants to, spend a Saturday evening talking about RNN or CNN algorithms. For those of you who don't even know what those are terms in AI of specific kinds of AI that are used for things. The only thing you really need to know is that there are lots of different kinds of AI, and as Tushar pointed out, they tend to be very good at different kinds of things. So and so thank you, Tushar. I really appreciate those examples. I think they're very relevant. I think some things like the security stuff is probably stuff that kids may not even be aware of that it exists, but they definitely do. And things like lookalike modeling and such are things that it really, if you go to any kind of a website and they try to sell you something, they've done some lookalike modeling on you. So it's really important
Absolutely.
to know that these things are actually happening. So
So,
very
Nisa, before we move on, somebody sent me a private message, Arnav and Aditi Gupta. They asked me a very interesting question. They said, we were wondering, how do AI machines learn things? Are they constantly learning? My friends, I will make your life very simple. Do not look at AI as something different from we as human beings, right? Our parents train us. The education improves us. And for rest of our life, we are learning. That's how AI is also. You train a model, then you basically do some validation, and then you basically throw it into the real world. And just as human minds work by learning, and how do we learn? Like, let's say, I meet, I have, let's say I have some image of people from the undergrad school Amit comes from, or the grad school Nisa comes from, and I've trained my mind like that, right? By the way, I have deep respect for the place where both of you went for your grad school, which is UC Berkeley, amazing school. And then you meet people, and then over a period of time, when you, let's say, meet new people from the same place, and let's say they display a different characteristic, what do? We basically feed it into our brain that people from Berkeley can be like this as well. Similarly, our AI machines are. They are trained with certain characteristic. As they see new data, which is different from what they would have predicted based upon their prior knowledge and prior training, then they have a feedback loop which goes back into the model and updates it. Now, I can talk about control system jargons and electrical engineering and all. Forget it. This is how human brain works. This is what you simulate. And that is the beauty of AI. It's a continual learning process, which is what you don't get in analytics, in databases, in every other aspect of it. And that is a beauty because environments are never constant, they keep evolving. And so Nissa, with every answer, it will always come back, and I'm going to haunt Indian parents. Environments evolve, things change. So the very same way our parents brought up in India does not have to be replicated in US. My parents decided I'm going to become an engineer when I was probably 3 years old, 3 days old. You guys should not do that. Move on, Nisa. I'm going to make it a little interesting for kids, and I'm going to be standing up for kids more than for parents. Go ahead.
That should be fine. And by the way, I think there are different kinds of parents here, not just Indian parents. But yeah, I think yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to comment on when my parents decided I was going to be an engineer. Leave that out, for now. So, oh no, so this is awesome. I think that was a really good question. So, and I think you also kind of answered a little bit about how AI is different from humans. Maybe you can actually elaborate on that a bit. You've talked about how it's similar. How are they different?
Absolutely. Step back and think through this, right? If you remember biology from 10th grade or over a period of time, one of the most challenging part of AI, of human brain and how human mind works, is the actual nervous system and the brain psychology and the way internal part of the brain works. There's what we call intuition. There is something called hunch, and humans' ability to capture a lot of signals. And think about this. We human beings, and I gave you an example that, hey, our parents train us. That is one part of the game. But we human beings have also been trained with 5,000 years of history. Our survival, which is built into our genes, into the way we work, right? Like, I'm not going to name, but I'm going to pick up myself and the way I grew up. I came from a certain part of my country, from a certain community, and we think, live, and work in a different way. So those things, so the human, so if you look at AI and divide it into parts, training, validation, deployment, which is inference. If you look at human beings, our training is much more complex and for a much longer period of time. AI models is a little bit tough and tricky. They are trying to get there. For example, with GPT-2, GPT-3 and 2 models that you have heard from OpenAI, where they actually, kind of look at the everything on World Wide Web to train a model. But look, that is so complicated, right? GPT-3 has 175 billion parameters. Now they're talking about a trillion parameters, right? And then also, I'm not sure they can beat human beings, right? So that is one part of the training, right? Validation. We humans have a very interesting characteristic. We get trained, but while we are getting trained as a kid growing up, we are also getting validated, tested. We go through schools, exams, everything. AI models don't. They train, they validate. In case of kids, it's not like for till grade 10, you just study, and then in 11th and 12th, you get trained. You get validated throughout. Then when you actually go into the real world, right? In AI, you do an inference. If the results are different, you can improve the model, and nobody can sue you typically if the way works. In human life, in human beings, as we actually live our life and we are drawing inferences, we are training ourselves. But the interesting part of human mind and the way it is that the biases work in much more deeply. So in case of AI also, the models are biased to some extent because of the data from the past, but you can do something while training itself to take out the bias, right? In case of human beings, taking out bias is very tough. It requires a lot of training over a period of time. And I'm not going to talk about racial bias and gender bias and religious bias. They are very deep. Some places AI is a little bit easier than human beings in terms of biasing. Some places humans are better in terms of training. And then when you actually deploy it over a period of time, we human beings have some advantages. Like in a given environment, in a given situation, in a room, we can pick up many more signals than, let's say, an AI model can do. But when it comes to looking at the whole global environment, in terms of data getting fed from a lot of different places and in real time updating us, that's the place where AI starts beating us. So, what AI has done is, and the last 5, 7 years have been fascinating for AI, is with cloud computing becoming very cheap and compute and storage being available, has changed the dynamics of AI. By the way, those who don't know, I have been in AI for 23 years now, 24. My undergrad thesis in 97 in IIT was with a faculty member who was an ex-NASA research scientist in control systems, and I used that. And those days, deep learning and stuff were not there. I used something called genetic algorithms. And in '99, when I did my master's at University of Cincinnati, but my advisor happened to be from the undergrad school of Amit, IIT Delhi. So I'm always very grateful to IIT Delhi undergrads. My thesis was using pattern recognition, and then I never used it for a long period of time. So over a period of time, these things will work. And my way of looking at AI, my friend says, a lot of times you'll read these articles. What happens is the way you have to look at AI is not something which is threatening or going to replace human beings. Over a period of time, the way it's going to evolve is like man and machine. There are things we human beings are good at. There are things which machines are good at, right? That's how, the things for which we use. Similarly, over a period of time, we'll realize there are things which human beings are good at, the things which AI is good at, and will work together with human in the loop. That's how it's going to emerge, Nisa.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, this is, I mean, there are definitely people going around saying that, AI will replace humans and talking about, things like that. But practically speaking, if you look at what AI is good at, I tend to agree with you. There are so many places where AIs and humans can work well together that I think, and there's enough money to be made in those areas, which is ultimately what motivates people
Absolutely,
to
absolutely.
innovate. And
It's
so
Go
that's
ahead.
more likely. So that brings me kind of to maybe my next question. Can you talk a bit about sort of these, some of these AI examples that you mentioned in the companies that you work for? How do they typically come about inside a company? So like one thing that kids are often curious about is, how do these things really get built inside these companies? I mean, how long does it take? How many people are involved? What do they do? Kind of stuff like that.
Yeah,
You
the
know,
kids nowadays have a lot of interesting questions. When I was growing up, I never bothered how things happen in my dad's factory. I only went there once a year. So, my friends, here is how you should think. Okay, before I bore you with software development life cycle, continuous integration and development, agile methodologies, you'll figure it out. As you grow, right? You become product managers, you become engineering leaders, you'll run companies. And I always feel that we should be training our kids to become leaders, not just workers. One of the key things you have to understand that anytime you're building something, it needs to sell. As Nissa said, that's where money comes in, right? People never pay for things which are good. They pay for things which solves some key challenges and pain points for them. That's a key thing you have to understand. So, for example, if I ask you, any of you, that hey, why don't you participate in a competition Nisa is organizing, or develop a model or do something like this, you are actually building a product. And what I would advise all of you is you do not run after the most geeky thing that you hear about, self-driving car, L3, L4, or something to transform the medicine world. All that is good. Think about common problems that you see around yourself. Okay, in the way, for example, your house works, your teacher works, your parents work, whatever you see around, and see if that can be improved. Okay, do not worry about AI first. Think about the problem you're going to solve. Once you think about the problem you're going to solve, then think about how we can automate that process. Okay, can we write a software to make it easier? Can we make it write a script so that the whole mundane work can be simplified? Once that goes through, then you think about how to improve it. And look at AI is not as a collection of algorithms, but as an opportunity where you leverage experience from the past. So, for example, when you are trying to do some cooking for the first time in your home, right? You try it, and then your mom comes and says, "Hey, do it like this," or dad says, "Do it like this." What they're giving to you is an experience of over a large number of time. That's what AI is. So, when you're looking at a problem, try to solve it in a simple way, and then think, if I had data on this problem for last 5 years or 10 years, could it have improved what I'm doing? And if you can get that data from publicly or privately available sources and integrate it with your software to improve it, you guys are done. That is more than sufficient for people who are in high school. Now, of course, you can improve it over a period of time, right? And if you want, I can talk about, different algorithms and all. And my way of thinking is before we get into very complicated algorithms and this and that, for high school kids or people below that, think about statistics and probability as the first step towards AI. Okay. Control system and engineering will come later in your undergrad. See if you can apply statistics or probability, some simple things to improve it. Now, I was looking at my son's sixth grade book and he's in summer, he's going from fifth to sixth grade. They actually have a chapter on statistics and probability, and I studied it for the first time in, I think, in 10th standard, right, Nissa, or probably 11th or 12th. It's a very good thing.
yes.
So, think about how you can intuitively understand, and having a very strong background in fundamental mathematics. So, for example, I myself had an interesting background of studying engineering, maths, and stuff like that, and I had courses like optimization techniques in my undergrad. And then I worked as a researcher in AI way back in late 90s. And then after that, I was an engineer in a different field. Then I went to Wall Street, came back to technology industry. And the reason I could easily pick up, and I don't do modeling or stuff like that, but I intuitively understand that, and that is because of my high school maths. So make sure that you understand those things really well. So three parts to it. Number one, my appeal to kids is make sure whenever you are working on a problem, think about some real challenges around you and see how it can be solved or improved. Number two, do not look for fancy ways to solve it. Solve a very simple problem and see how you can use data to improve it. In terms of your coursework, focus on statistics and calculus. And of course, if to do good in calculus, your algebra, trigonometry has to be good and all that. Make sure you do that. And if that interests you, uh, that's amazing. I'm not going to say any of you that, hey, once you do this computer engineering or computer science, you can go into any field of your choice, but you can apply AI to all of them to improve yourself. So I was talking to a friend of mine, a very amazingly smart guy, undergrad in electronics from IIT, and then he did a PhD from Kellogg in marketing. He's a faculty in Indian School of Business. And he was telling me that those are people, even in business side, for example, who actually want to do meaningful research and produce really good papers, they got to understand data science, machine analysis, number crunching, or else their work is very, superficial. That's the way I would advise kids to look at.
This is a really good point, and I think I'd like to sort of reinforce that. One of the things that really makes sort of AI possibly very interesting relative to other areas of computer science is that the application really is everywhere, and it's not just AI that's application is everywhere. It's also just because the data, everything is data driven to some extent, and so having an understanding of how data works and being able to use it and apply it makes a lot of sense. And then the other point that Tushar made, which I think is really good for kids to know, is it is always good to start with the problem. Like, find
I
the
think
problem, because at the end of the day, if you're not solving a problem, it doesn't matter how fancy your solution is, it's not solving a problem. No, and I think there was actually another question that I wanted to ask. So somebody sent me a question saying, and we, in a very general sense, we in this room, we in companies, how do we ensure that AI is not used badly? This is a
right,
serious question and a serious problem these days.
right. So, I'll give you a very interesting story. Ninth grade. I was a ninth grade student, and I was participating in school elocution competition and stuff like that. Was preparing for a topic, and I prepared for a topic which said, "Should India use its atomic energy for building nuclear bombs?" Now, India did eventually end up making nuclear bombs. A separate story. But my argument was the bigger challenge India had was energy, right? It's an energy deficient country. We still have electricity blackouts, rollouts. The parts of country does not have electricity. And the point was atomic energy is a powerful force. You can use it to create electricity. You can use it to create bombs. Maybe you do both. But where should your focus be, right? Atomic energy by itself is not a bad thing, right? Atomic bombs are, right? Atomic energy is great. I mean, in France, 20% of electricity comes from nuclear energy, correct? The same thing with AI. Look at it as a very potent and powerful weapon. The question is, how do we want to use this, right? The bad, it's not like the AI algorithms start behaving in a bad manner. It's human beings who start behaving in a bad. So instead of trying to blame AI and control proliferation of AI, control human beings who actually have bad intent. Let's make sure that when people have access to supercomputers or cloud computing and all, let's control it in such a way that we can basically make sure that the people who are accessing it are the right kind of people. And that's how it's a law and enforcement problem, not an AI problem. So arguing that, you know for example, fake news, right? In GPT-3 when it came, or GPT-2, there's a lot of news, a lot of hullabaloo about, hey, it can be used to create fake news. Well, I mean, think about this. People have been creating fake news for ages. Forget about AI. There was no computers there, right? The people in the small locality create fake news about somebody, right? So you know what I mean. So that has to do with human intention, human brains, and how they work, rather than AI. So the problem is a human centered. The solution has to be human centered. Constraining AI is not the right approach. That's how I look at it.
No, no, this makes a lot of sense. This was actually reminds me of there was a news article that I read a while back, and the news article said AI fires human. Which, if you think about it, is an extremely kind of like, it's a kind of news article that you go, whoa, and then you start reading, right? And if you really dug into it, first of all, there was no AI there at all. They had a database problem, and the AI didn't fire the human. Some human typed the wrong thing into a database, and the database did what the database did, which was it returned that information. And so I totally agree with Tushar. Just and AI is a technology,
I mean, and think about human evolution, right? 1825, James Watt invented steam engine, right? People thought that human beings will never be required. Well, that did not happen, right? People moved from farming to more productive industries, right? Come much faster. Industries came in, industrial age came in, right? Does it mean people never could feed themselves? They could. They moved from mundane job in factories into more productive jobs in offices. Computers came in 1980s, right? 70s and 80s. Again, people started moving into computer. They create a lot more opportunities. Now AI is going to spawn a lot more new industries. The kind of work, for example, people did before will not be needed, but people can retrain and train themselves to do something better. And my advice to kids is, and to parents more, is education is not a process of learning how to master a few traits to make money. It's a process to train yourself so you can learn for the rest of your life.
that's
I'll
a good
give you a very specific example, Nissa, and some of them who are from my kind of background relate to it. Is in early 1990s, my family was stranded in Gulf during the first Gulf War when Iraq attacked Kuwait, and then America went there, and my family was repatriated from Iraq to India before the war started. That led me into a situation where in 12th grade I did not get a chance to go to a school or attend any coaching, and I had to prepare for exams on my own. And some of you who understand it, the Indian system or are from the country would agree that things like the IIT exams are not easy to clear with all the facilities and coaching and everything. And I was in a situation, my family landed up in Bangalore, which was not known for being a good, Bangalore has a lot of local engineering colleges, not known for, compared to, let's say, some of the North Indian cities. Long story short, I got into a situation where I had to prepare for JEE exam without teacher, without coaching, without any guidance, with books. So now I was in a situation where was driving a car while paving the road. I went through a lot. My JE rank was not that great, but I got something for rest of my life. And that is, you can put me into any field and and very soon in few weeks or months, I will understand it enough to start working and appearing for interviews in that area. And then I myself realized that compared to people who had much better coaching than me and who had much better rank, for example, right? This quota factory which goes in India, I have done much better than them. So I was an electrical engineer, did a master's in computer science, worked in Intel's research lab in mobile wireless computing, worked in their design with high performance algorithms, then did a full-time MBA on Wall Street in New York, became a banker on Wall Street, was in private equity, came back to technology industry, was doing M&A, then built products, businesses, not because I'm smarter than anybody. My In my case, my life forced me to get myself educated in a certain way. I think that's what parents should try to give to kids. Help them get educated to learn how to learn. And once that is done, over a period of time, today it is AI. Tomorrow it will be something else, Nisa. Some other trade will come in, which we have not even thought about, right? We don't even know about it. Over a period of time, it will get evolved.
Yeah, I think the point that he made was really, valid, which is about learning to learn. And I think Tushar, I was just going to suggest that, it can even be connected up with what you said earlier about solving problems. Because if you, decide, learn how to solve problems and you learn how to apply what you know and learn what you don't know, then that positions you well in life.
Exactly. And if you think about artificial intelligence, my an ideal AI ML algorithm is we should be able to train it in such a way that over a period of time it can learn also on its own to solve problems for which it has not been trained. It's a very tricky and a very challenging problem, right? Supervised learning, unsupervised learning, a lot of these things which come over a period of time. And that is how you should think. But anyway, go ahead, Nisa. You had
Yeah,
something
more
else.
questions. So, yeah, the next question is, what are the trends in AI for medicine?
Very good. So I actually looked in this area, and Amit is aware of it. I organized a couple of coffee chats around this over a period of time, and in terms of applying AI for medicine. So give me a second Let me share something with you guys. Let me to pull something here. So, this is, I was working on this for some of my own coffee chats and stuff like that. And here are some interesting areas you all can look in healthcare where AI can be used over a period of time. You know, green, yellow, red. This is more from the perspective of startups, but it applies to all of them. There are areas of healthcare where workflow and operations management, a lot of AI can be leveraged. Uh, Healthcare IT is a 1.2 trillion dollar industry, so it's ripe for innovation. Intelligent mobile patient tracking. I mean, some of this has been influenced by your things like coronavirus. Telemedicine is a very big area where AI has a lot of uses that you can basically think about. This is more complicated, which is disease prediction using multi-signal analysis. And that is, somebody may not have corona or any of these diseases. If you look at uh, yeah, if you look at one or two characteristics in a person, but when you look at a person from multiple different angles, you might actually predict diseases much more quicker. Companies have been built around it, like Livongo, which monitor people through cloud on a continuous basis. AI-driven remote home-based patient monitoring is another area where remote patient care is where AI can be leveraged and used a lot. Um, Cloud-based healthcare AI PaaS solution. I'm not going to get into it, or MLOps. Then there are certain areas which I have marked as red, not because they're not good areas, because they're overfunded and overcrowded. Drug discovery. I mean, every damn pharma company is doing it. There's a huge application of AI. It's already successfully being done. Intelligent personalized medicine prescription is a little bit of a dicey area, so I'll skip. AI-driven medical imaging for clinical decision-making assistance. This is a huge area where radiologists can basically leverage AI, especially by training their models on huge amount of AI images from the past. Epidemiological forecasting. This is a little bit of a tricky thing. For example, if the healthcare systems of the world were integrated, when coronavirus started initially in China and kind of started spreading, we could have basically figured it out much sooner, and kind of figure out, take steps. Data anonymization in AI is in a field in itself for blockchain monitoring, post-operation remote care, maternal care. But what I would say is some of the key areas from this page is AI for medical imaging. If you're thinking of new areas to look into or new companies to build, I will encourage you to think about AI-driven medical imaging, AI-driven healthcare flow management. Telemedicine is a very interesting area. And then, of course, disease predictions, remote monitoring, or taking care of patients. Some of these areas are very hot right now in terms of where people can go. So there's a lot of information, but happy to answer any specific questions you all may have.
I think that was really good. I think there are also many kids who are looking for things like science fair projects, and medicine is a huge area that they like to work.
Absolutely. And I would encourage all of you to think. I'll give you a problem to solve. Think creatively. During coronavirus, one of the key challenges was for us to actually go to doctors, right? Medical hospitals did not want to take you, or the medical centers would be like, hey, if you're not corona patient, can you wait, stuff like that. In developing countries, still a problem. Non-corona patients are being turned away. So think, uh, what can be done to improve the whole area of telemedicine as much as you can think. And how would you think? How should you think? Well, think about what happens when you actually go to the doctor. Think about that whole flow. You go there, you register, nurse checks your blood pressure, whatever. Then you go to the doctor, you have that human touch, you feel. Then you go and take a medicine, you come back, right? How can we do it most closely at home? What are the challenges, right? Challenges, somebody cannot touch you and with a stethoscope, right? How can you simulate it? Think from that perspective. And you do not have to solve the whole telemedicine problem. If you figure out what are the 5 or 10 problems, pick any one or two of them which can enhance the telemedicine experience. I mean, as a kid also, I can tell you, you're creating 100, 200, $500 million company in a way. And that's how you should think.
Absolutely. So more questions, Tushar. This is great. So one
Absolutely.
question is, how do you assess? So the question is, what are the pros and cons of using AIs to do certain tasks? So I think maybe I would ask the question as, how do you decide whether AI is more good than bad for some tasks?
Well,
Should you be
look,
applying AI to everything, or should you be what is the trade-off? When do you decide not to use AI?
I'll tell you to step back. Okay. And one of my business school teachers told me, when you have a hammer in hand, everything looks like a nail. So don't think like that. Just because you understood AI concepts, do not start looking for problems to solve. Forget AI, forget statistics, forget everything. Look at a problem as it is, a real problem, and work on solving it. If it is a problem where you need to analyze or you can train something to leverage historical data to make improvements going forward, it's a very good test case for AI. Now, do not start with the most complicated problem. Start with, don't start with a very complicated approach, start with a simple approach. Regression can be a very simple approach. Statistical analysis can be an approach. Then slowly and slowly you build other algorithms, models over a period of time. Now, not use AI. I mean, if you're trying to do simple things like predictive analytics from the past or simple analytics from the past, you do not have to jump into it. And how can you avoid it? You can avoid it by looking at the problem and focusing upon it to see how you can move the metric. Metric is a very important thing, right? I'm not going to bore you with, what is it called? I'm forgetting it myself. The three, four metrics in classification, F1 score, and stuff like that. Forget all of that. Look at some real life metrics of measuring how something is working and see if, see if you can actually make a real improvement in that. And you can do it, right? So accuracy is a metric, right? Which they use a lot in artificial intelligence. So think from that perspective and see what can be used to improve it, and try to use all simple tools first before you get into something more fancy and work from there. That's how you should be approaching it. And by the way, Nisa, that's the way you should approach life anyways, right?
The other part, because one thing I have also noticed is there's so much noise right now around AI that people feel like they have to try the most fancy thing. They feel like somehow, if they use a simple AI and what they heard about in the news is like something like Sindhu and I say like deep reinforcement learning. Deep reinforcement learning is used in things like self-driving cars. It is quite difficult. It's unlikely your problem needs it. Unless
So
you need it, please don't
exactly.
go looking there as a start. Try something simpler.
But reinforcement learning, by the way, itself is a very interesting concept in computer science, and I saw that being applied. I worked with a very smart researcher in Facebook in that area, right? For those who don't know reinforcement learning, I have a very simple way for you to help you understand it. It's how you grow up, especially in traditional families. You do something good, your parents reward you. You're a good kid. For those who understand Hindi, acha ladka. If you don't do it, you get it. Different degrees in which you get it depends upon culture, time, age, and city where you live in. And then over a period of time, those behaviors get reinforced, right? You get rewarded for good things, you don't get rewarded for good things. And then slowly and slowly, what they're trying to do is to dictate and direct you to behave in a certain way to reach certain goal, academically, as a human being, as you grow. That's how reinforcement learning works. You reward things in certain way, you don't reward certain things. And the goal is for you to train you to behave in a certain way when you get there. A very good example is an onboarding algorithm for advertisers on Facebook. When they come and they want more and more advertisers on the platform, and they have an onboarding journey online. When they get into it, they want them to take steps which takes them towards the completion instead of they're just dropping it somewhere in between. So that's how it works. For those who do not, so that's how it works. We can figure out the specific algorithm. That is the basic concept.
Now, that is the
I,
basic.
so whenever you're thinking about life, think about AI. Whenever you're thinking about AI, think about life. How would I approach something like this? And then as you go through the process, you should know what different techniques and tools are intuitively, but try to solve the problem step by step to see where it's needed. Classify, supervised learning, unsupervised learning, reinforcement learning. There can be combination of that as well. So that is where you have to think. But the same thing comes to AI. That's why it becomes fashionable. That's why we get entrapped into it. The challenge is if you get entrapped into those kind of things and you start thinking about tools to accomplish your goal, then you will at some point of time lose the sight on the goal itself. And you develop something fancy which does not go anywhere and which explains why so many products fail in companies, why so many startups do not go anywhere in spite of very good people, why investments do not work.
There's a question here. Can you comment on how many different kinds of AI have been developed, and is there any scope of developing some kind of an online voting for more correctness?
Online voting for more correctness. Let me understand. What does it mean?
So I think, yeah, if the person could please elaborate on the question. My understanding of it was really maybe more like, can you have multiple AIs vote? And now
But
multiple AIs voting. voting is a technique that is used inside AIs, but I don't think multiple public AIs voting is something people do.
Okay,
No.
that is a technology I have to still pick up on, but let me make life much simple for you. There are three main classification of algorithms which are most popular, which is used: supervised learning, unsupervised learning, and reinforcement learning. Okay. And you have to understand this. I'm not going to bore you with all the algorithms. Look at this way: how you teach kids. One place you can do supervised learning where you basically have your parents look at every chapter that the kids wants to do. You have tuition, you have coaching, you have this and that, and you basically train your kids to do certain things. What does your kid basically grow up to become? It can basically solve certain kind of problems very clearly. That's what supervised learning does: classification problem. It can classify whether something belongs to this category or this category. Unsupervised learning, kids especially who do not have a good family background or land up in a situation where they don't get a lot of supervision to learn. So you figure out what to do. They don't know which goal also they are going to, and they train themselves over a period of time. They typically turn out to be in long term much more successful people, by the way. you know Kids from broken families or kids from underprivileged backgrounds, sometimes it happens. Unsupervised learning algorithms, clustering, K means clustering, for example. You do not basically get into a zone of doing very accurate answers, but your algorithms actually over a period of time solve many more problems than what they're trained for. Reinforcement learning is a new way of learning, which I explained to you, where you get rewarded for good things and bad things. That's how kids grow up. Now, reinforcement learning, the way I look at it, is not really a third class. Supervised and unsupervised are the two main things. And I can be wrong, is reinforcement learning can probably be used with both of them based upon the circumstances, and that's more to do with how you're treating the algorithm. Like in the case of kid, you can have a supervised learning of a kid or an unsupervised learning of a kid, and then reinforcement learning can work on top of it, and you can reward the kid or punish the kid the way they are behaving. That's how you have to look. There are three main categories within supervised learning. When you want to talk about algorithms and stuff, I want to give you a very simple way to look at it. There are two main classes of things that you need to understand, classify, analyze: text, and then images and video. And sometimes it's a combination of the two. For text kind of stuff, something called RNN, recurrent neural networks, are very common. I'm not going to bore with all the details. You can figure it out. But that's an area. There are enough algorithms which are available in the market for you to use. But typically for images and videos, you use CNN, convolutional neural networks. Here are some of the broad areas that you need to understand and then work your way through that.
Makes sense. So I think we're out of time. So I think I'll take just one more question, and then I don't want to take up too much of Tushar's time.
It's
So I
fine.
think,
If you have other questions, I'm happy to answer. Another 10-15 minutes will not be
so
a
I
problem.
think maybe there may be two more questions, and I'll just list them, and you can just. One of them is, was AI or could AI have been used to find a vaccination for COVID? And then the other question is, are there any successful AI applications for stock price prediction?
Very
God
good. So
knows
I'm
people have tried. Yeah.
right. And by the way, stock price prediction, I thought about it for the first time. I remember in 1996, between the third and fourth year of my undergrad. And I explained to you why it's a tricky problem to solve. But let's look at a vaccine problem first. Uh, you know, the whole vaccination, the whole drug discovery which happened last year, right? Inherently, AI was used. People leveraged a lot of data. They collaborated across a lot of different fields. Otherwise, it would not have been possible to bring something so fast. But I want you guys to know about one concept in AI, which I actually was in some panel discussions recently. One area where I feel AI can be really transformational in long term in drug discovery, in medicine, not just vaccines, any kind of stuff, is there's a concept of federated learning. What does it mean? Medicine. So when this whole COVID thing happened, Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, made a very interesting statement. He said, COVID does not have any borders. So its solution will find the process of finding its solution will also not have any borders. So you can very easily use concepts like federated learning, which can help organizations across government and private sector across different geographies to collaborate together in a secure way while maintaining their data consistency and security to develop solutions. So federated learning has got a huge future going forward in terms of application in the area of AI, and I'm pretty sure it's going to work. Now, individual companies are already using AI in a traditional way, and they're basically figuring it out. But on a broader scale, also, it has got a lot of application. Now comes stock market price prediction. So, I've been reading Wall Street Journal almost every day for the last 16 years since I went to business school. If you read the section of Wall Street Journal, it's called Marketplace, Business and Marketplace, it talks about, the stock movement yesterday, and you read it every day, you will figure out that number of factors which impact stock prices, their individual performance, their industry performance, economy performance, bond market, Federal Reserve, it's just humongous. And on top of it, there are human emotions, market manipulations, high frequency trading, very large number of factors. And second, the way these factors interact and behave in different stages of time, the way it interacted in 1985 versus 95 by 2015 again changes. The sheer number of large number of variables and the way they interact with each other and how human emotions basically come into it makes a stock price prediction and not just exponentially large but theoretically impossible. And that's one of the reasons why AI has not been able, people have not been able to use AI for, making what I would call reasonable judgments and predictions.
So I was going to summarize it to say, please learn AI, but do not use it to predict the stock market. That's all
Don't
I'm
do,
saying.
no, don't do that.
Just don't do it. Don't do it.
Don't go into that business.
Don't do it. Find some way to help the world. Don't try to time the stock market. Yeah. So okay, I think we are 7 minutes over. I
No
want to
worries.
thank Tushar so much. Tushar, this was amazing, and really appreciate all of your insights, both the AI insights as well as the life insights. I think it was very cool. I think we got most of the questions answered, but not all of them. But I think we got most of them, and you gave some really, I think, good insights to parents and students about, if I could summarize it, I would probably say, AI is everywhere. You can apply it everywhere. So you should really, do it. However, remember, you start with a problem. You don't start with AI. You start with the problem and figure out how to solve it in any means possible.
Thank you, Nisa, for the opportunity. It's always fun to talk to people.
It was really wonderful. Thank you, guys. And thank you, everyone. I really appreciate all the questions and all the great insights. Thank you again, Tushar.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye.